Alright, so last video we talked about going to class. Go ahead and check it out if you haven't. But now that you're in class, what do? You're listening, you're trying to find the main topics, but how do you get it all down is you take notes. And when I was in school, I honestly never used any of the really fancy, like divide your paper in half, write these over here, these topics and these notes. That was too complicated for me. I wanted to be focused on what the professor was saying during class rather than how I was taking my notes. So I would just very clearly, if it was on the PowerPoint and I had time to write it, I would write it. If they're one of the professors that puts all the words up there and you're just completely overwhelmed, don't even worry about it. Be listening to them. If they're taking a really long time on one part of it, summarize what they're saying really quick. If it's just kind of background information, you can probably leave it. Again, if it's online, you can go back through, but you don't want your notes to be just pages and pages and pages and pages over 30 seconds of what they talked about. You're trying to be efficient. You're trying to make sure that you're actually studying what's going to be on the test. So don't get completely immersed in all these examples and details if they're throwing too much at you. That being said, if you have a different kind of professor that barely puts any up and really talks, jot it down and then be making your notes about what they said underneath it. So I'm a really big fan of bullet points, and I'm a really big fan of just kind of sections. So for example, I brought my old physics 2 notes to show you. So if I'm talking about capacitors, I just have it here, and then I have my things. And then I would get into a circuit or series, and I would just put it here and then have my next thing. So just kind of go in your little chunks. And if I had something really interesting from capacitors that I needed to know, that was a little bit later, then I would just come back and jot it on the sides. Another huge point about notes. Messy notes lead to good grades. Messy notes lead to a smart brain. If your notes are these perfect, immaculate, color-coded, everything beautiful, like calligraphy writing, you're not learning, you're focusing on taking your notes. Focus on what you're learning. If a color is going to help it stand out, do it because it's signaling something to your brain. Your notes are for you. Nobody's going to be grading your notes. So just be going off of what's going to help you learn the best and what's going to help you integrate the information. Now, when I take it, I would usually use a pencil and I would write bullet points with my little things to say I have my one little kind of topic that we're talking about, put some bullet points down, leave a little bit of room on the side, but don't leave pages and pages and pages. I mean, you can come in and scribble it later. And then the next thing is I had a color system with highlighters. So for example, yellow, definitions. Green, something really, really important. Like if the professor was like, make sure that you know this topic for the test, it would be green with green stars all over it. Or if it was just something that was a really recurring theme, if it seemed to be something that was really integral to the topic that we were talking about, I would go ahead and put it in green. Now, when you're in class, don't worry too much about your colors. If you have time to do a quick little bit of highlighting, or if you have pink means something, pink means equations, whatever you decide to put pink as, or whatever your colors are, do it. But that's the beauty of going back and reviewing your notes, because as you review your notes, you start coloring in, you start making your little side comments, you start seeing how something in the beginning of the chapter connects to something at the end of the chapter, and you write next to those to draw those connections. So the more you study your notes, the more messy they should get. But it's this messiness that makes sense because it's something that you've been integrating, it's something that you've been putting down on paper, and it's the connections that you're making in your brain. You're just putting them on paper so when you come back, you can see them. Again, that being said, it's stuff that's already in your brain. It's just a refresher. So your note should be brief, concise, and things that just help you remember what the professor said, remember what you read. It doesn't have to have all of this imagery, be crazy grammatically correct. You're trying to be efficient. You're trying to think, okay, this is what it says, like this one sentence on the paper, that is what I want in my brain. I don't want 5 words out of the 40 that I just put down. You're just taking up too much space. You're taking up too much time. So again, I wanted to show you an example. I have my things written in pencil. My green are things that were really, really important. And then orange, pink, and blue were different topics that we were learning about at the time in class. Whatever your system is that works for you, I'm not going to tell you what colors to put with what because depending on your class, depending on what you focus on, depending how your brain works, it'll work better for you. Just play with it. I also love doing boxes of summaries. So if I'm going through a unit, for this one, it's physics. We're learning about series, parallel circuits. So I finish up all of the circuits, and before I go on to the next things, I would just put a box, and that was just my summary area. So if we're learning about in parallel and in series circuits, I would have circuits at the top, and then I have parallel here, series here, and it was just straight up compare and contrast the two. What's similar about them, what's different, what's the main things that I need to take away. And I love doing little chunks of summaries as I'm going because it helps keep the topics kind of in check in your brain, and it helps everything not muddle all together. Because again, messy notes lead to good grades, but still you need to be able to make sense of them. Messy, not in the way that you don't care how they look, messy in the way that you've been adding colors, you've been adding other notes, you've been just studying the heck out of it and really making sure that you have all of these new connections forming in your brain. I hope that helps with more on notes, and I will see you guys for the next episode.